are you able to set up a separate bank account in a divorce? So how does this work? So a divorce is happening, a divorce is maybe already started, or you're thinking about filing, and you're worried about the money disappearing out of the joint account, right? Because you both have access to it. So can you set up a separate account? So you can. There's no law against it in Michigan. You know, where I practice, I'm a divorce attorney here in Michigan. There's no laws against setting up separate accounts or changing how you pay the bills or any of that. You're certainly free to do all that. There's certainly some reason to be cautious about making this decision and some thought that should go into it. But the short answer is if you want to set a separate bank account, you certainly can. You have every right to do that. Now, if a divorce case has already been filed, you could run into where there's maybe a restraining order in place. You know, one of the advantages of filing for divorce is getting court orders signed without a hearing. You can get these orders, what are called ex parte orders, and it'll be pretty routine for a judge to sign an order that restricts what goes on with bank accounts, and it says that you're not allowed to change the accounts or cash things out or change beneficiaries or move money around or do all that kind of stuff. So that would then mean you wouldn't be able to set up a separate account. But the idea that people start thinking about here is they're not getting along, they think there's trouble coming, and they're going to be getting divorced, and there's a divorce already filed, or maybe not one filed yet, but it's definitely imminent, and they're worried about how are the bills going to get paid. You know, my paycheck is going into this joint account, and I'm afraid, what if the money goes in there, my wife takes the money, and now I can't pay the bills? What if that happens? Or maybe there's already been some money taken out, or there's some funny business with bill paying, or whatever the situation is that's got you concerned about it. So then you're thinking, well, can I set up a separate account? So you certainly can. It's not something you'd want to be doing if there's no good reason, if there's no concern, if nothing has happened yet that would cause you to say, well, I got to do a separate account. Because setting up a separate account when you're in a marriage and you're thinking a divorce might be happening, a divorce might be coming, doing a separate account like that can, you know, it can only be seen as a declaration of war. Basically, you know, if you want to try to keep the peace, you wouldn't just go doing that without discussion with your spouse, with your wife first, you know. But sometimes there's reason not to discuss it first. If you think somebody's about to go and take all the money as soon as your paycheck hits, then you would change it, do a separate account. There's a related video here that you should be aware of, you might want to take a look at, called Dividing Your Property in a Divorce. So that's one to keep in mind. Same concept, related concept of what happens to these bank accounts, if there's separate accounts, if there's joint accounts, because there's this whole other related concept of separate property versus marital property. You know, for example, we had a client recently, he'd only been married for a year, and they had separate bank accounts. They hadn't even really combined accounts. They had like one joint account that they really didn't keep any money in. So he had his bank account, his wife had her bank account, and there was money, you know, there was 20, 30 grand in these bank accounts. And the client's thinking, well, this is my separate account, this is my money, I'm not gonna have to divide this with my wife during a divorce. Well, the way Michigan law is, that's not necessarily true. Really, the question isn't just whose name is on the bank account. The question is also what money went in there, where did that money come from? If you've only been married for a year, for example, and you have this bank account from before you got married, and now the bank account's still there, the question would be, did you put any money into it during the marriage? Because if you didn't, you have a valid argument to say, I'm gonna keep that entire bank account now that we're getting divorced. I'm assuming there's no prenuptial agreement. A prenup certainly would be valid. A prenup would 100% would protect that separate account. There's no question. But people, you know, a lot of times they don't do prenuptial agreements. They're not that common. They're totally valid. They're totally enforceable the way Michigan law is. But it seems like people never do them. Prenups just really are not that typical in our practice, what we see every day. So yeah, you know, so this client I met with, it was a discussion of, you know, look, it's not just whose name is on the bank account, it's where'd the money come from. Keeping separate accounts doesn't necessarily mean in a divorce that the property is going to be separate. It's not that simple. You got to look at whose name is on the account, but you also got to look at where'd the money come from. If you've been depositing money into an account in your name only while you're married, you can't really say, well, that's my money, my wife doesn't get part of that. It doesn't work that way. The money you earned during the marriage is marital money. So if your wife doesn't want any of it, of course, that's fine. But just because her name's not on the bank account doesn't mean that she doesn't get any part of it. That might be true, might not be true, depends on where that money came from, how long it's been there, how long you've been married, what the story is there a prenuptial agreement, all these other things to go along. Same with debt. You know, there's this related discussion of debts and what happens to debt in a divorce. Well, debt can be the same way, just like assets. You can have debt in both names or in separate names. And if the debt is, for example, if your wife owes $5,000 on a Visa and your name's not on the account, you're not even an authorized user, Visa can't sue you to collect the money. But if you're getting divorced and your wife spent that money while you were married, she would have a valid claim to say, well, I need him to pay part of that, or she might even want you to pay all of it if she's not working or doesn't have her own income. So the name on the account alone doesn't tell you everything about it. It's not dispositive. It's not the final answer on it. We would need to know whose name's on the debt and what it was used for and when the debt was incurred. When did that debt happen? Because if it's debt from during the marriage, you got to expect you got some liability on it. If it's debt from prior to the marriage, then you got a valid argument that it shouldn't involve you and you don't have anything to do with it. A lot of times student loans will be that way. Student loan is a typical debt that's in one name only and occurred before the marriage and is still there. Normally you'd say, well, I don't have anything to do with that. I shouldn't have to pay any of that student loan debt. So anyways, that's the whole world of separate accounts, joint accounts, and a sense of what all that looks like. Hopefully that helps you.